Start tonight's meeting. Thank you all for coming for this second of our two-night circus to the Washington Conservation Guild. We're doing something a little different this year. Usually we have our three-ring circus, and this is our virtual two-ring circus. So thank you all for coming. We have three speakers tonight, and I wanted to let you know that it is all being recorded, just so you know. The format tonight will be much like it was last week, where each speaker will have 15 minutes to do their presentation, and then we'll answer questions for about 5 minutes after that. And if you have questions, please just put them into the chat, if you don't mind. And I wanted to go ahead and introduce our first speaker, who we were just in the breakout room talking about. It's midnight in her country, Cairo, Egypt, and we want to thank her for braving cyberspace to join us, cyber distance to join us here. Rasha Shaheen is our first speaker, and she is a senior photograph conservator at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. She is responsible for conserving the archives in Cairo's museums. She earned her master's in conservation of heritage papers and photographs from Catania University, Italy. She's now a PhD student in Fayoum University, where she's studying the use of nano silver to treat black and white silver gelatin prints. In addition to having published many articles on conservation and presented at numerous conservation functions, she's active in AIC, IIC, and ICOM. Please welcome Rasha Shaheen. Her talk is entitled "A Modify of the Archives of the Coptic Museum to Preserve Its Sustainability." And Rasha, if you want to go ahead and take over, you can share your screen at this point.
Okay. Okay, you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. First, I'm really happy to attend this important meeting. This is my first time in the Washington Conservation Guild. I'm Rasha Shaheen. I'm a senior photographer, a photograph conservator at the Egyptian Museum. It's in Cairo, in Egypt. My presentation today about modify the archives of the Coptic Museum to preserve its sustainability. My team, me and my professor Mona Fouad, she's head of conservation department at Cairo University. First, I want to present my museum, the Coptic Museum. It was built on an important spot as it's based on the walls of the famous Roman fortress of Babylon, which is considered the most important and the largest monument of the Roman Empire in Egypt. The importance of the Coptic Museum archive because it's a historical record documenting the opening of the new wing of the museum and the methods of celebration at the time, at that time, and the custom for official celebration as well as the attendance. As they document the methods of presentation, it was preserved at that time, and the types of showcases which were made of food, as well as the free display outside. In addition to the pictures of the Abu Fana and Saint Catherine excavations. The preservation and conservation works for the photographic album of the Coptic Museum archive included several stages that began with the various documentation works, including archaeological description and photographic documentation, and then the various conservation steps of cleaning, consolidation, completion, and binding. First, we can see the visual investigation. We can see many aspects of deterioration tears and the wax stamps, as you see in the pictures. This album is number 2 of the Coptic Museum General Record. This album contains 1,391 photos. These photos are silver gelatins, black and white photographs of the type of DOP. As we see the aspects of damage, dirt and wax stains, weakness, missing part. About the photographs, so we can see the damage in dirt and stains, fingerprint stains, ink spots, silver mirroring. The second step I do was investigate or examine the surface by USP digital microscope with 300x. To see the fibers and the tears and the wax stains. In the right side, you can see the ink spots and the adhesive spots. As you know, the examination was done with using the digital microscope is very useful for the photograph conservator because it's easy to use it without make a damage of the photos. And the second examination, I do it by SEM edX. I take a sample of the gelatin layer to understand about something about the silver halide. As we see here, we can see the coloride and the silver. So I think that the silver halide here used was the chloride, the silver chloride. And we can see here a small percentage of sulfite. I think it's back to the damage of chloride in the surface of the photos. And the right side, it's a photo of the gelatin layer, where we can see the clarified of the gelatin, but sometimes we can see some impurities in the gelatin layer. After that, I doing UV examination to know if there are watermark or some biological damage of the photos. You can see in the right photo here some fluorescence about the microbial damage. It could clear here in the right photos. You can see it. So I have to do the biological test to know if there are biological damage or not. I found that I identify that there are three microorganisms. I think it's common. We can find it in the air. It's common, but it's not make a damage for the photo, for the album. After that, I doing a preservation plan or cleaning plan. Start with mechanical cleaning using the gum, the brushes, soft brushes, with cleaning, with mechanical cleaning. After that, I using a chemical cleaning. First, I test the photos about treatment of solution. I tested about the alcohol, ethyl alcohol solution. with water by 1 to 3%. It's a good to treatment with the photographs, with the image. This is the chemical cleaning before and after cleaning. After that, I treat with this is the treatment of tears and consolidations, weak places, completion about the process of missing parts. I use tissue paper with carboxymethyl cellulose to these steps. But here we can find, I put the tissue paper between the pages to, because I tested the pH of the paper, it was 2.2. So I have to put the paper between the pages because this pH is very high. After that, this is the steps. This is the card, the identify card about the album. I use a carboxymethyl cellulose also to completion process of the card. After that, I doing the binding of the album using the same materials of the original album, and using carboxymethyl cellulose also. This is the papers. It was between the pages of the album. It's have a pH 2.2, so I have to change it with the tissue paper here. The last step, after the binding process was completed, preparation was made of display or storage, as a non-acid cupboard case was prepared and warped with the same album warping paper and the same color from the outside, with the space has been created inside the container to place moisture control materials such as silica gel, and the card identify in the content of this container can be placed at the top. The album was controlled from temperature and the relative humidity with 17 to 23 Celsius degree and 40 to 50% of relative humidity. This is the album after preserving and conserving. Thank you.
Linda, you're muted.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, Rasha. I was trying to unmute myself from the wrong place. Thank you, Rasha. That is very interesting. I do have a couple of questions for you. One, we have a question about, did you mention what is the eventual use for this album? Is it going to go on display, or is it perhaps going to get digitized?
Sorry, please repeat your question, because
That's okay. The question was, is the photo album going to go on display? Is it for an exhibit, or is it going to get like digitized? Are you going to digitize the images? What was the eventual use for this photo album?
Okay. No, I didn't display it, or I store it in the storeroom, because I start to make a digitalizing of this album, but it take a time, and you want a fund to start this project, and I start to to share with my colleague how to preserve photographs, because the conservator understand the photographs is very few in Egypt. We are just 5 in Egyptian museum, so it's a big project to do it, and need more time and more money. So I will start this project as soon as possible.
I understand. We had one other question, and that was about the paper that the photographs, the paper of the album itself. Is what kind of condition was the paper substrate in, the paper that the photographs are on in the album?
The original paper of the album is acidic. I test the pH, it was 2.2. So I start to change the paper with the original, not the original paper, the primary or support paper, the paper between the pages. I change it with the tissue paper, non-acid. So I think it makes the photos more sustainable.
I understand. Gives it a barrier back there. Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. And did we have any other questions? Okay. I think those are. Go ahead.
I try to control the humidity and the temperature and store it in the room without UV.
We did have one other question, Rasha. Someone is asking, will you be doing this with more photographs in the collection? Will this be something, a method that you apply to more of the collections in the archives?
It depends on the case of the albums. Some museums have albums back to Ottomanic era. So it was albumin, not gelatin. So it's you treatment with another case with another case gelatin different with different in album and in gelatin different with albumina. Sorry. So it's depend the case of album.
I understand. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay,
let me just check and see if we have any other questions. We'll just give it a second. Do we have any other questions for Rasha? Thank you very much, Rasha. We greatly appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Josie, I'll turn this over to you. I think you're doing the next introduction.
Yes, I am. Okay. So our next presenter is Amanda Kasman, and she is a third-year graduate fellow in the Winterthur/University of Delaware program in art conservation, specializing in paintings. She's currently completing an internship at the Yale University Art Gallery and the Institute for the Preservation of Cultural Heritage, which thankfully reopened to staff late this summer. Past internships during her graduate studies were completed at the Smithsonian American Art Museum and the Dallas Museum of Art. Before attending graduate school, Amanda helped to conserve pre-Roman neurologic statuary in Sardinia, Italy, and conserved the Nancy B. McDaniel dollhouse featured in the Yuletide tour at the Winterthur Museum. So everyone, please focus your attention to Amanda. And Amanda, when you're ready.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to stop my video during the presentation. So if you would like to switch to standard viewing mode, that would allow the presentation to fill your entire screen. Good evening. I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional territory where I am presenting from. Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut acknowledges the nations of the Mohegan, Schaghticoke, Niantic, Quinnipiac, and Algonquin people. I would also like to express support for the Black Lives Matter movement, which is a major theme in this talk. In our field, dependent on mentorship and hands-on work, virtual internships often carry the stigma of limited supervision, low productivity, and poor self-discipline. As a rising third year in the Winter University of Delaware program in art conservation, I accepted the summer internship of my dreams at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, this position became a mostly virtual internship. I'm grateful, however, for the telework experiences that I gained by contributing to an exhibition related to social justice, especially at a time when museums are reinventing themselves to fit the needs of diverse communities. I also had the opportunity to delve deeply into research questions in a way that only self-quarantining could facilitate. The focus of my research was 29 paintings by William Henry Johnson's Fighters for Freedom series. They are planned to be exhibited in a traveling loan starting in 2022. These artworks serve as pivotal moments to American history, when the achievements of African Americans were suppressed by the media. These histories are ever more relevant in light of the Black Lives Matter movement. I hope that by hearing what I've learned through my virtual internship, you too will expand your knowledge of our shared history, which validates present-day calls for social reform. First, in the life of the prolific artist, William H. Johnson. Then I will describe the virtual work at my Smithsonian summer internship. And lastly, I'll share 4 abbreviated biographies of famous African Americans who were misrepresented in my history class. The life of William H. Johnson carries many of the themes thrown into sharp relief by the Black Lives Matter movement. How many times can we count when Johnson's career, which had a very promising start, was stifled by segregated galleries and denial of proper legal or medical attention? How many times did he flee his home out of fear for his life? William Henry Johnson was born in 1901 in Florence, South Carolina, to Alice Johnson, a domestic worker of mixed African and American Indian descent. He took up drawing at a young age to copy comic strips and was encouraged by his art teacher to pursue his passion as a career. In 1921, Johnson left the South for New York, where he attended the National Academy of Design. Although one of few students of color, his skillful work there was recognized by his professors, who awarded him several school-wide prizes. Paintings from this period in his career demonstrate his skill at realism, as well as his ability to imitate the expressionist style taking hold across the Atlantic. In 1926, he traveled to Paris, France. Like many artists preceding him, Johnson noted that there were many more doors open to him in Europe. He would stay until 1928, when he made a brief return to New York to apply for the Harman Foundation Award, one of the highest artistic awards offered to Black Americans. A year later, Johnson was awarded the gold medal, which meant his work was included in a traveling tour of 16 states. However, this win would not bring the financial security that he had hoped. Back in Europe in 1930, he married Holtje Craik, a Scandinavian textile and ceramic artist 15 years his senior. As a mixed race couple, they lived happily in Norway and Denmark, seeing artistic success wherever they went. Johnson's race may even have benefited his career while in Scandinavia. However, growing fascism in Europe leading up to the Second World War caused Johnson and his wife to flee Scandinavia for Harlem, New York in 1938. Johnson immediately integrated himself into the community, taking jobs at the Harlem Community Arts Center. Yet he still could hardly make enough to get by. Most galleries did not want to sell Black art, and there were few opportunities for him to exhibit his work. His style in this period changed again, now focusing on the Black experience. Adopting a folk style, he captured scenes of rural life, religious practice, and new styles of dance. He even traveled back to South Carolina to paint his family and their local Black community. Unfortunately, Johnson would end up leaving in a hurry after a frightening encounter with the Florence, South Carolina police reminded him of his diminished rights in his own country. Today, Johnson's paintings from this period are prized for their thoughtful design and honest subjects, although in his own time they were frequently misinterpreted by dealers and buyers as uneducated, further dampening his sales. When the war was at its height and rationing was at its peak, Holtje was diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer. Her death soon after devastated Johnson and triggered a rapid psychological and physical decline. Underlying his condition was an undiagnosed case of syphilis-induced paresis, which would worsen to a breaking point in the absence of proper medical attention. Yet he continued to paint. In his final series, started in 1947, Johnson depicted the fighters for freedom, bringing together everything that gave him pride in his African heritage. These history and symbolism-rich paintings therefore adopted an almost collage-like style in order to incorporate into a single image everything that Johnson found meaningful about such themes as the Underground Railroad, the United Nations, and African American dance. Tragically, this work came to a screeching halt in 1947 when Johnson was detained by police in Oslo for vagrancy. He was in fact confused because of his medical condition, but was far from impoverished, as he was traveling with over 1,000 paintings in crates and a suitcase full of cash. Although his late wife's family offered to take him in, the Norwegian authorities decided instead to send him back to America. There, Johnson would be institutionalized in Central Islip State Hospital, where he would stay until his death, 2 decades later, almost forgotten. Between 1948 and 1955, Johnson's legal guardian, appraisers, and members of the State Department bungled attempts to do right by the paintings that Johnson had with him in Oslo. First, they were sent to Johnson's impoverished mother in rural South Carolina, but she could not afford the postal fees, so they sat abandoned in a warehouse. The State Department was aware that the wealth of cash found on Johnson's person at the time of his arrest could be used to make the shipment. Yet no actions were taken to return the art to Johnson's family. Instead, the legal guardian shipped the paintings to New York and had them appraised. According to the appraiser's report, the approximately 1,200 paintings, watercolors, and prints had a maximum nominal value of just $100. It goes on, the artworks were of such inferior quality that no purchaser, therefore, could be or would be found. In brief, those paintings, watercolors, and prints were infantile, end quote. In 1955, all of the artworks were donated to the Harmon Foundation with signed affidavits saying that they were worthless, and the legal guardian closed the case. When the Harmon Foundation closed in 1967, the remaining artworks by Johnson, numbering over 1,000, were given to the National Collection of Fine Arts, which became the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Today, Johnson's most notable paintings are continually requested for loan, but many lesser-known works have remained in storage. The show planned for 2022, which has been a dream of SAM's curators for over a decade, represents the first time the Fighters for Freedom series will be shown together since 1947. A significance made even more relevant due to its parallels with the Black Lives Matter movement. The George Floyd protests were the backdrop of my summer as I moved to DC with police-instituted curfews and boarded-up shop windows. And due to the pandemic, the date when it would be safe for me to enter the museum and work in person continued to be pushed back. Despite this tumultuous situation and months of waiting, I'm grateful for my summer experience because the circumstances enabled me to dive deeply into archival research in a way that I never had before. Johnson had left a treasure trove of symbols in his final series of paintings for me to untangle. It was known from prior examination that some of the details in the Fighters for Freedom were copied from newspaper and magazine clippings. These connections could be traced through digital archives, but locating the original source was often difficult in light of Johnson's colorful and stylistic reimagining of black and white photographs, and the fact that few, if any, labels are retained with the paintings to help identify the subject. I researched the imagery in 29 paintings depicting Black history from the Haitian Revolution to the Second World War. Suffice to say, I vastly increased my historical knowledge of American history, but this research also triggered deep self-reflection. I was made aware of shameless falsehoods perpetuated by my education, specifically related to African American history. I heard the names of Johnson's Fighters for Freedom, including Harriet Tubman, George Washington Carver, Josephine Baker, and Marian Anderson. I even believed I knew why they were important to our history, but I was proved wrong again and again. The short anecdotes in my textbooks and history lessons had left out the best part. There were tales of spies and secret missions, ending famine, discovering the North Pole, fighting Nazis and fascists, and selfless acts of charity despite personal hardship. Why would these inspiring narratives of heroism by people of color, each worthy of its own Hollywood film, why would they have been kept from me? I assume these truths, at least some of them, were kept from you too. So far, I have not seen these lost histories discussed in Black Lives Matter dialogue, and I hope that this talk can fill in some gaps. So your history pop quiz begins now. Do you know the name of the first casualty of the Revolutionary War? Did you know that this person was a former slave and that people of color have rallied around this historical figure for centuries to argue for civil rights in times of war? Crispus Attucks, the first martyr for American independence, escaped slavery at the age of 27 in 1743. He miraculously evaded capture and worked on ships and on the docks under a new name, Michael Johnson. In the 1760s, tensions began to rise in the English colonies due to the unwelcome presence of British troops, and the resulting unrest reached a breaking point on March 5, 1770, in the deadly encounter called the Boston Massacre. When the smoke cleared, Crispus Attucks and 2 other men were dead, with many others injured. In the immediate aftermath, Bostonians showed Attucks considerable considerable respect, providing him a proper burial, although laws governing Blacks at that time forbade it, and they referred to him by his chosen name, Michael Johnson. It was the newspapers that perpetuated the use of his former enslaved name, Crispus Attucks. In the following years, even at the height of the American Revolutionary War, depictions of the massacre often whitewashed the scene, making the figure of the first martyr a white man. Only after tensions began to rise again, this time leading up to the American Civil War, did Attucks become a mythic hero. Abolitionists used the story of Attucks' martyrdom to declare that African Americans had put their lives on the line for the freedom of whites from British rule, and in return, the emancipation of slaves from their American masters was long overdue. After emancipation, Attucks remained a powerful symbol. In World War I, Crispus Attucks was used as a symbol for leverage to combat Jim Crow laws. Unfortunately, today, most people are not taught the name Michael Johnson or Crispus Attucks. It is crucial that this story not be lost because it affirms the pivotal role that people of color have played in the formation and maintenance of this country. Should Crispus Attucks, or rather Michael Johnson, be revived as a symbol of Black Lives Matter? A symbol of a common man who shared both in America's struggles and in America's triumphs. Next, Harriet Tubman. I would imagine that most audience members know that Harriet Tubman, born Araminta Ross, was the most famous conductor on the Underground Railroad. She single-handedly guided over 80 enslaved people on at least 13 death-defying journeys into and out of the South. What was not impressed upon me in my primary education were two factors which made this story even more remarkable. At age 13, a head injury inflicted by her master caused Tubman to develop narcolepsy. Imagine Tubman leading escaped slaves through the night with armed slave hunters right at their heels, and at any moment she could have lost consciousness. Tubman's family members attest that she could collapse in the middle of a sentence while standing up. This sheds a whole new light on her already daredevil exploits. It is also well documented that in her 40s, after the Underground Railroad, Tubman infiltrated Confederate lines as a spy for the U.S. Army. Why was this not in my history books? Her role in leading plantation raids alongside the Union Army directly resulted in the emancipation of 700 people, almost 10 times more than she led along the Underground Railroad. It should be noted that these raids occurred in South Carolina, and although I grew up in South Carolina, went to school there from the age of 4 to 17, I didn't catch a whiff of this history until I left. Might this have been a deliberate repression of history, a history that the locals were embarrassed to admit? Dr. George Washington Carver is another name that you might recognize. He was likely the most famous African American from the early 20th century. You might be thinking, that peanut guy, and you're right, Dr. Carver did work tirelessly to promote peanuts and peanut products. But why? How has his legacy to spare the rural South from the very real and imminent threat of starvation been muddled to this extent? Dr. Carver was the first African American to attend Iowa State University. There he studied agriculture, and when he returned to the Jim Crow South in the 1890s, his goal was to solve the unthinkable poverty of sharecroppers, who were often among the first generation of emancipated slaves after the Civil War. The poor state of the farmland was because of the excessive demands on sharecroppers, which forced them to plant cotton in the same fields over and over until all of the nutrients in the soil was depleted. The South was at a breaking point. It was Dr. Carver who realized that the system of crop rotation that he'd been taught in the North could be adapted for use in the South without impacting the frequency of the cotton harvests. Peanuts grow in the precise months when cotton does not, so if peanuts were planted, it would improve the cotton yields in the same year, as well as providing another source of protein. The next challenge for Carver was to convince people that peanuts had uses, now that there would be so many of them. He created a list of 300 uses of peanuts, and although some of them are a little bit strange, he got the attention of the US government. He was invited to speak to Congress and was contracted to develop solutions to the food shortages in the First World War. Following this success, diverting a national crisis, Dr. Carver was internationally famous, and it seemed that everything was being named for him. But what we remember today is peanut butter. Before sharing the story of the last fighter for freedom, I should warn you that the images on the next slide take a dark turn, depicting nudity hypersexualizing the body of a Black woman raised in abject poverty, subject to physical abuse, and pressured into provocative dancing to earn a living. This woman is Josephine Baker, depicted in William H. Johnson's painting Three Great Dancers, highlighted here in blue. Baker is remembered the world over as a sex icon, a dark-skinned beauty, happy to bear all and humiliate herself with silly faces and dances that misrepresented her African heritage. Her career took off in Paris in the 1920s, at a time when a deluge of revealing photographs were taken, some famously involving just a skirt of bananas. These daring performances secured her legacy, But she did not just perpetuate eroticized imagery of the Black Jezebel. Her contributions to the war effort while in France would earn her a Medal of Honor. And she was a fierce advocate for desegregation in the civil rights movement. Yet images and writings of this heroism continue to be buried under heaps of images of banana skirts, even in the 2005 film intended to showcase her pioneering career. Just to assure you that another film, a remake, is overdue, let's delve into her activities during World War II. In Nazi-occupied France, it appeared to the Axis powers that Baker was continuing to tour her performance unchanged, traveling unimpeded through the country to entertain the oppressors of her new home. In fact, Baker had been contracted as a spy for the French resistance. Using invisible ink, she would record the location and movement of Nazi troops on her sheet music and send it to French informants. She was rewarded for her bravery by the leader of the French army in a public ceremony in 1943. Thereafter, she refused to perform in venues that were not racially integrated. But this damaged her reputation in America. In fact, she had a file at the FBI filled with information intended to stifle her career because of her outspoken opposition to segregation. Luckily, she had a French passport, which allowed her to travel unimpeded, and she remained a French celebrity and a national hero until her death in 1975. While this is the last story I've prepared for you today, please remember that I mentioned only 4 of the 29 paintings. Johnson's paintings of Addax, Tubman, Carver, Baker, and many others will be showcased in the exhibition in 2022. I'm grateful to the Washington Conservation Guild for the opportunity to share my summer research, and I hope that you are inspired to seek out your own suppressed pieces of history. If you want to learn more, I will post 2 links in the chat, one to the exhibition venues, and I'll also post a link to the recent SAM eye-level blog by Kira Teeter, my co-presenter for the joint AIC talk this summer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. At this time, we're open for questions. So I will start. How's his fame in Europe right now? Is he even taught in the historical context that you might know of? I mean, Europe's such a big place, but do you have any information about that?
I don't have much information about it. I know that he did sell work while he was there, but the vast majority of his work is in American collections. There are still over 1,000 of his works in the SAM collection.
Have you seen any of the others?
I had the opportunity to in-paint on one of them over the summer when I was in for just 2 days, but most of them I have seen in images online, I'm afraid.
Okay. Any other folks out there? So I see it in the chat. Someone says this deserves a publication. During the breakout rooms, I had asked you about if you were going to present it anywhere else. So maybe you can share that with the rest of the group.
Of course. I'm giving a longer version of the same presentation at a Yale-wide event in February, but there's also an AIC talk this summer, which I'm doing jointly with a collaborator at the Smithsonian, my supervisor, Kira Teeter. So that will be virtual in May/June.
And I believe we have a question. Rachel's iPad. Rachel, go ahead. If you would like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I have to shut one of my screens because I'm echoing everybody. Sorry. Yeah, is that better?
We can hear you.
I'm a painting conservator in Quebec City, and I just had a question about I wanted to say thank you because I said in my little message that I basically got shivers listening to this because there's so much stuff that we just have never learned that we don't know about. And thank you so much. It's amazing. It kind of brings tears to my eyes, but I was also getting like shivers from listening to you talk about these things. I wanted to ask more about the materials. I know that you mentioned like a burlap. So I guess that's like a jute fabric, which is very rough and very acidic, I think. I imagine because he lived through so much hardship that he didn't have access to excellent materials. And so, and then also know that you just said that you haven't gotten to see things in real life, but What kind of paint medium did he use? Did he use several different kinds? Did he varnish? Did he not varnish? What sort of, do you have an impression about the state of conservation of his pieces that you have gotten to see? That's kind of like more like maybe a bit about the materials. Thank you.
I do know that all of those questions will be answered in the AIC talk this summer, which it will be again with Kira, who has been treating these. So almost all of the Fighters for Freedom are on board, and they are oil on board. But the burlap, I do know that he was working certainly with an economical focus, that he was trying to conserve money and reusing materials. But the board is, there is damage sustained to the paintings because they are on board. There's warping, loss of corners. Some of the boards are flaying apart because it's masonite. I'm not aware of color change, but Kira can certainly speak to that more this summer. Oh, and saying that you felt shivers, thank you so much. It was really a major learning experience this summer to realize how much of my history education as a child had been misleading. So my eyes are open too. Thank you.
So we've got someone in the chat asking, how might all of these rediscovered narratives of African-American history help inform your decision-making process as a conservator once you're able to perhaps actually treat them in the lab?
Oh, wow. Certainly contacting and communicating with stakeholders, making sure that members of the African-American community are involved in the conservation of their own cultural heritage, to ensure that people know these stories, to ensure that they're shared. The story is so important to these. I mean, I just barely got to treat them, but I spent my entire summer getting emotional about the stories behind these works. That's so important.
All right, thank you so much, Amanda. I think that's all we have right now for questions. But if anyone does have further questions, they can contact you via email. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, thank you again. So our next presentation actually has two speakers. So I'll introduce the first one, Julianna Ly. She's a paintings conservator trained at the Winterthur/University of Delaware program in art conservation. During her graduate training, Julianna interned at the Yale University Art Gallery and the Smithsonian American Art Museum. She completed her final year of graduate study at the Fulbright/American Friends of the Mauritshuis intern at the Royal Picture Gallery, Mauritshuis in The Hague, Netherlands. Following her graduation, Julianna moved to Denver, Colorado, and is now the assistant conservator of paintings at the Western Center for the Conservation of Fine Arts. Julianna is passionate about current diversity initiatives in the field and was the 2018 Untold Stories Assistant, a 2017 teaching assistant for a Historically Black Colleges and Universities workshop, and is a current Emerging Conservation Professionals Network HBCU mentor. The second presenter is Nicole Chausse. She's a pre-programmed student in Fairfax, Virginia. She graduated from the University of Virginia with majors in chemistry and archaeology. During her final undergraduate year, she attended the Archaeological Field School at Thomas Jefferson's Monticello and worked in the Library Preservation Department of Alderman Library at the university. In the summer of 2019, she participated in the Smithsonian's CIBA program, the Conservation Internship for Broadening Access, learning about object conservation at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. And here we have, when you are all ready, I will mute myself.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Sorry. We are so excited to share with you today the 10-day public view documentation and treatment of David Hockney's installation titled Snails Space with Vari-Lites, Painting as Performance. This treatment took place at the Smithsonian American Art Museum in the summer of 2019. So we first really want to extend our gratitude to the Washington Conservation Guild for providing the platform to share this project and for giving us the opportunity as emerging conservation professionals to share our work with you all today. So before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the ancestral lands on which we are speaking to you from today. I am speaking from the place currently known as Denver, Colorado, which are the ancestral lands of the Sioux, Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples.
And I am in what is now called Fairfax, Virginia, which are the ancestral lands of the Manahoac peoples.
We will begin today by introducing you to Hockney's installation, sharing a bit about the art historical background, and delving into the treatment history of the work. We will then share the 10-day public view documentation and treatment and how we tackled some of the challenges of documenting such a complex installation. Finally, we will discuss some unexpected outcomes and end with our reflections on the role of diversity internships within the museum field. Under the direction of Chief of Conservation, Amber Kerr, and Paintings Conservator, Gwen Manthe, I had the opportunity to supervise 3 pre-program interns, 2 of which were in independent diversity internship programs. So Nicole, who you're going to hear from today, was in the Smithsonian Internship for Broadening Access, or SIBA program, and Kevin Torres was in the UCLA Getty Diversity Internship program. Kirby Martino, a pre-program intern and now current graduate student at the University of Amsterdam, was also on our team. So I'm so excited to be sharing this project with one of my fellow team members, Nicole, today. And we not only hope to share with you the treatment, but also how this specific project facilitated team building and encouraged peer interaction and mentorship.
Here you can see the subject of our talk, David Hockney's installation, Snails Space with Vari-Lites, Painting as Performance. Hockney's piece is complex, composed of 2 side-by-side vertical canvases spanning 21 feet in length, 6 interlocking floor panels extending out from the wall, and over 1,000 wooden dowels placed on top of colorful shapes within the 4 elements, completed with a 9-minute cycled lighting display. David Hockney is an English painter, stage designer, and draftsman. His painting, titled Portrait of an Artist, Pool with 2 Figures, sold for $90 million at Christie's in New York City in 2018, making it the most expensive work at that time ever sold by a living artist. More than 20 years after this was painted, Hockney's style shifted towards the abstract, influenced by his involvement in theater design for the Los Angeles Music Center Opera in 1987. Following 1987, the impact and influence of theater is evident. By 1995, Hockney began expanding his paintings into what he referred to as 3 dimensions, allowing them to exist in their own right as a clear reaction to his time spent focused on theatrical design. With the popularity of Hockney's art and this work's ability to draw viewers in, following the installation of Snails Space at SAM in 2006, there were many incidents reported where the public interacted with and potentially damaged the artwork. Between the years 2007 and 2013, 55 reports were filed for displaced dowels, and additional reports were made for alarm malfunctions, foreign objects, and more. In an effort to minimize the number of incidents, the display room for Snails Space was renovated in 2015, which helps to protect the piece from visitor interactions. However, due to the previous frequency of incidents, treatments had been focused on emergency responses instead of full condition assessments.
So therefore, one of the major goals of this project, in addition to the treatment, was to completely document all of the painted surfaces, as well as over the 1,000 wooden dowels on the surface. So the first step was to establish a uniform way to locate and describe condition issues. And this involved using a pre-existing lettering system that you can see here, which describes the large sections of the work and which specific shapes had dowels on them. I then implemented a new numbering system to better locate condition issues on shapes that actually overlapped through larger paneled sections. And my hope was that this would help us identify specifically where condition issues were in the future. I then created these condition survey forms for each individual shape in an effort to create a thorough and efficient system while also working with interns with varying levels of conservation experience. And my goal for these was for anyone looking at them to identify immediately what shape was looked at, when it was looked at, and what or why caused this treatment. Each of the forms had a thumbnail image in the top right-hand corner, again, for you to quickly look and see exactly what shape was being examined. On the left, a conservator or intern then had space to visually document what they were seeing using a uniform conservation key, including losses indicated in yellow, flaking paint in red, scratches in green, and so on. On the right, the conservator or intern could then indicate what type of treatment was needed: cleaning, consolidation, filling and painting, or another type of treatment. And lastly, they could indicate the conservation status. And this last part was added in the hopes that this could help direct where treatment should start in the future, or what percentage of the installation needed immediate or urgent treatment, or was stable. This was a fast-paced project with many moving parts. And as I'm sure many of you know, the Lunder Conservation Center is the first glass-enclosed, fully visible conservation studio space in the United States. But due to how large this work was and the short time span of the treatment and documentation, all of this occurred directly in the gallery spaces in view of the public. And so we began by using photo documentation, removing all of the wooden dowels, and starting to use those condition survey forms. And the first forms we all did together, as it was really important for us as a team to establish a universal understanding of the condition terminology we were using. Here you can just see two small details of different issues we were noticing. So you can see cracking in high areas of impasto, as well as losses where those larger floor panels would actually come together. As acrylic surfaces can be extremely sensitive, we began the treatment through gentle dry cleaning methods to remove the bulk of the grime on the surface. Some of the surfaces also exhibited wax residue, and so to reduce these, we used a small amount of odorless mineral spirits on a swab. When Hockney installed the work, there was actually no attachment method between the over 1,000 wooden dowels and the painted surface, and they were simply placed freely in place. But unfortunately, due to visitor interaction, conservators in the past thought by applying a small amount of wax, they could actually temporarily fix them into place. But as our field has developed and we now know a lot more about the materials we use, we wanted to remove this wax, as we know it can be detrimental to a paint film over time. So our last final days were spent in almost an assembly line format, with each of us at stations, recounting dowels, cleaning them, removing wax residues, and then placing them back in their original positions. It was a whirlwind of 10 days, but this documentation and treatment provided insight on Hockney's technique. And one exciting aspect was being able to document Hockney's pentimenti, most clearly evident here in raking light. And as a result of our documentation, and specifically the survey forms, we also found that the most common condition issue present on the surface included small areas of loss along the edges and cracking in high areas of impasto. And by doing this exercise, it really allowed us to take a step back and look at the work more holistically, giving both the curatorial and conservation departments a broader look at our conservation concerns.
As the treatment was conducted in view of the public in the gallery spaces, it gave us an opportunity to engage with people of diverse backgrounds and show them the presence of our field and the importance of our work. This included a group of high school teachers funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities, as well as local elementary and middle school tours. We are very grateful to Lunder's program coordinator, Laura Hoffman, for her help and work creating the signs you see here that helped us to promote our field in an engaging way. We gave several impromptu tours and lectures and used Sam's a la carte to show the public the conservation tools we were using. I personally loved to let the children see the dirty cleaning sponges up close under magnification, and gave them materials to touch so that they could have a tactile interaction while they were in the museum. One thing that did surprise me about this project was the independence and autonomy that was granted to us by Amber Kerr and our supervisors. It allowed us to work together, problem solve, and think critically on our own before asking for help. We were trusted to be stewards of the artwork as well as ambassadors of the field as we interacted with the public and told them about art conservation. It was truly a full circle moment for me, as the Lunder Conservation Center was the first place that I visited to learn more about art conservation during my second year in college. I took a public lab tour with the previous program's coordinator, and while I was there, I distinctly noticed seeing someone Asian through the glass walls. It was a moment for me where I could see her and picture myself in her station, and really believe that I could end up there in this career one day. It happened to be the objects fellow at the time, Dorothy Chang, whom I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet. Regardless, when I applied for my internship program and listed my Smithsonian placement preferences with Sam and National Portrait Gallery at the top, I was ecstatic to find myself as Sam's objects conservation intern under the amazing Ariel O'Connor. This SAM internship was my first experience in art conservation, and it was made possible by the Smithsonian's Conservation Internship for Broadening Access, or CEBA program, that is generously funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. I was selected as one of 13 pre-program interns that summer, each placed at a different Smithsonian conservation lab. Our cohort met weekly for different activities and learning experiences. In these pictures, you can see most of them, and a couple might be in this meeting today. Being a CEBA intern was an incredible privilege that expanded my conservation knowledge beyond my specific lab, and it also gave me a network of interns and peers that can share advice and support as we journey on towards grad school. So for CEBA, I am very thankful. I also want to take a moment to thank all of the conservators who are willing to supervise an intern for CEBA or otherwise, because without your time and support, our pre-program experiences would not be possible. Amber Kerr's trust in our team of interns allowed us to forge bonds with one another and helped us to develop skills beyond treatment and documentation. After we finished with cleaning Snails Space, we presented our project to the art conservators at Lunder. We were then given the opportunity to present to the curators of SAM, which none of the pre-program interns at that time ever expected out of their summer. Even further, when the call for abstracts went out for this Washington Conservation Guild event, a supervisor reached out to us directly and encouraged us to share about our experiences. Funded internships like CEBA are fantastic because they finance and place interns in museums, but the support and encouragement of their supervisors can make a world of a difference to the experience and careers of aspiring conservators.
Being able to guide Nicole, Kevin, and Kirby through this project really allowed me to give back, mentoring them like I was mentored by countless pre-program and graduate students before me. It was so fulfilling being able to share what I had learned in such a collaborative setting, while also working with interns who truly shared my passion for the field. I'm so grateful to Amber and Gwen for really trusting me in this leadership role. It is these relationships built with mentors and fellow interns that are crucial in not only sharing our passion for the field, but also supporting emerging conservation professionals. It is our hope that programs like CEBA and the UCLA Getty Diversity Internship Program continue, and that diversity within our field becomes the expectation and not the exception. Nicole and I were so excited to really present this project together, and we're grateful to Amber, Gwen, the conservation and curatorial staff at SAM, and to all of you for your time and attention today.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. So at this time, we're ready for any questions if we've got some. Let's see. I think I do have one. All right. So in the chat, they wanted to ask how you felt, how both of you felt working in the public's eye, where everyone could see what you're doing. And I'll continue to read what else they said. This is so important for our field, and many conservators don't like it. I encourage you to keep doing it throughout your career. You never know who will see/hear you and be inspired, which I know, Nicole, you already mentioned that's how you got into it. But yeah, tell us what's the experience when folks are looking at you as you work.
Nicole, do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, Lunder in itself is kind of like a fishbowl experience if you're working there. The walls are glass, so you're usually visible to the public, but you don't necessarily have to speak to them or interact because the walls are closed. But I really enjoyed the opportunity to speak to visitors and kids and adults and tour members of all kinds, because I think whenever I go to a new place, I'm pretty shy, but when I'm able to have a personal experience with someone or a conversation that's meaningful and that teaches me something, it really solidifies my experience and just makes it so much brighter in my memory.
Yeah, well, just echoing Nicole, I think public outreach is something that I really enjoy, and I think our whole team did. So although, some conservators might see that it takes a little bit more time while you're working to take a step away to explain what you're doing, I think it made it even more impactful for us and for the visitors. And so oftentimes when we were working, we would almost have one person on our team designated to really handle public outreach. We had stanchions in front of us, but there was no glass wall. So often, small children or tour groups or even older adults would come just ask us what we were doing. And so that was an incredible opportunity, I think, for us to all get experience, really talking about what we were doing in an engaging, but also a very accessible way.
Excellent. So I have another message here. So they're congratulating again. Great presentation. Could you speak a bit more about the dowels and how you address the issue of public interactions?
Yeah, so as you saw, there were many dowels, and the first thing was really making sure that we had a good count and a number for all of them. Over the years, the numbers have changed, unfortunately. They have been moved by visitors. And so that was part of the huge kind of push for documenting, is to make sure that in the future, we really know exactly how many, where they belong. Luckily, Hockney didn't have specific placement for each individual dowel. I think that would have made our jobs a lot harder, but documentation was key. And now I think it's our hope, especially with those condition survey forms, because we know exactly how many dowels are there and we have really great photo documentation. If an incident were to happen in the future, we can immediately pull that individual form and really look and see what has changed or what we might need to address.
Okay, I believe someone is trying to raise their hand. I'm trying to see if I can see the name. Madeline Brents. Are you there, Madeline? Ah, there you go. When you're ready.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to ask, what was the public's reaction to seeing your work up close? I know you both talked about what your experience was like talking to the public, but I don't know, Nicole, did you inspire the next line of conservator?
I could only hope to. I think, honestly, initially, I feel like a lot of people were confused as to what was happening, even if they had never seen this piece before, because a lot of people thought we might have been painting on it because we were using brushes to take the dust off. That was kind of the most common comment that we got. But it was funny also how people who had visited the museum in the past or frequently, they were able to see the piece in a brand new light, because usually Snails Space is, there's a light sequence that's projected on it, and it's lots of different colors, and it's always shifting and the angles are changing. But when we were working on it, we had full white light shining to help us see well, and that was just completely new for any visitor that was able to see it, and it was just very bright and very cool. Yeah.
So now that you touched, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Julianna.
Sorry, just quickly adding on to Nicole, I think one thing that we had a photo of was the Sam's a la carte, which I know Nicole and Kirby really manned a lot during their internship experience. And I think that was just really wonderful for me to see how excited the public got by, what are we removing? Let's look at it under these optivisors. What are optivisors? And just kind of seeing the different tools we were using. And I think that, yeah, having that tactile experience while also seeing directly what we were doing was really important.
So really quickly, Nicole and Julianna, you guys mentioned about the lighting. Was anything modified or changed with the lights and how it's presented on display?
I can answer that question. So in 2013, or I think around then, they did a really thorough documentation of the Vari-Lite projection sequence. And Vari-Lites are kind of in the old school stage or theater light. And the sequence was documented and actually changed over to LEDs. So it became quieter because the Vari-Lites got they're hard to maintain and they produced a lot of heat, which is why they wanted to change them to LEDs. So that happened when the installation room was changed and opened up. And so yeah, that was kind of in the past a little bit, but for our documentation, we focused on the surface of the painting and all of the dowels and just visually what you could see there, because the lights were already taken care of a few years back.
Okay. Well, I believe that's all the time we have, so thank you both. And so at this time, if there's any more questions, I believe Nicole and Juliana, you will gladly take them via email. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
All right. So before I say any farewells, I want to remind everyone that our next WCG intern/fellow meeting is on Tuesday, January 19th. So that's this coming Tuesday. And if you'd like more information or if you'd like to RSVP, please go to our website, or if you can see the chat, the link should be there. That was already posted by Miguel. But thank you everyone for listening to Rasha, Juliana, Nicole, and Amanda this evening. And we thank you all for joining us on our second evening of the, normally our 3-ring, but this was a 2-tent circus. And we appreciate all the support that you guys show to the Washington Conservation Guild. And again, thank you for your time. Everyone, please have a great evening.